All right, so you're interested in Jordan Peterson, huh? More specifically, what he's been saying about Jesus. Buckle up, because we're diving deep into some of his statements that have really been making waves.
Oh yeah, definitely some thought-provoking stuff.
For those maybe not as familiar, Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist.
Right.
And professor, really become this influential figure known for all his lectures and books on psychology, philosophy, and even religion. We're gonna unpack this YouTube video from Capturing Christianity, which analyzes a clip from Peterson's appearance on The Diary of a CEO.
Sounds interesting.
And this interview gets pretty deep pretty quickly.
It really does, yeah. Doesn't shy away from the tough questions at all. In fact, he leans right into them.
He does.
The interviewer just straight up asks Peterson, like, do you believe in a man in the sky God? You know, trying to get right at those core beliefs about Jesus.
Yeah, and you might think, right, like Peterson would just dismiss that, like, oh, that's too simple of a question.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He takes this seemingly basic question and just spins it into this fascinating discussion about, of all things, the human brain. He argues that because the human brain is the most complex thing that we know of, maybe, just maybe, the idea of God sharing some human-like qualities isn't as crazy as some atheists would have you believe.
It's interesting. It's like he's highlighting this tension between complexity and simplicity.
Right.
Like, you know, we've all heard of Occam's razor.
Right.
The idea that, like, the simplest explanation is usually the best.
Right.
But Peterson seems to be challenging that here.
Yeah.
You know, maybe sometimes the more complex explanation is actually closer to the truth, especially when you're talking about something as profound as, you know, where did the universe come from? You know, is there a God?
Yeah, it makes you think. So he's suggesting that the complexity of our brains, our capacity for thought, for feeling, even for creating, it, you know, hints that a complex God might not be so far-fetched after all.
It's a pretty compelling argument when you think about it that way.
It is. It is. But then he brings up another one of his favorite topics, which is his critique of postmodernism.
Oh yeah, he's not a fan.
Now, for anyone who needs a refresher, postmodernism is this philosophical movement that questions the whole idea of absolute truth.
Right.
And these grand narratives. It's essentially rejecting the notion that there's like one big story that can explain everything. And Peterson really pushes back against this.
He does. He argues that these meta-narratives, as they're called, are actually essential for a functioning society. Like, think about religions, cultural values, even the idea of progress. These are all meta-narratives, right?
Right.
And they provide like a shared framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
Peterson uses this really striking analogy to illustrate his point. He says, imagine a soccer game where every single person shows up with their own rule book.
Oh, wow.
Total chaos, right. That's how he sees postmodernism, as this force that undermines shared values and ultimately leads to societal breakdown.
Interesting, yeah.
And this is where Christianity, and specifically the story of Jesus, comes in.
Okay, I'm curious to hear where he goes with this.
Me too. So we left off with Peterson making this really bold claim.
Yeah, Jesus is God.
Yeah.
And calling it indisputable.
Right. I mean, that's a loaded statement for sure.
Definitely.
Especially for folks who maybe aren't coming from a Christian background. It can be kind of off-putting, maybe even a little aggressive. But I think it's important to consider what he means by indisputable.
Yeah. What's the context here?
Exactly.
It doesn't seem like he's saying, like, you have to accept the traditional Christian doctrine of the Trinity, you know, hook, line, and sinker.
Right. It's not about dogma.
No, it's more nuanced than that. I think what he's getting at is the story of Jesus's passion, his willingness to suffer and sacrifice. That, to Peterson, reflects a universal truth about how we should live.
So it's less about believing every detail and more about, like, what the story represents.
Right, exactly. It's about confronting suffering head on and finding meaning in it.
Okay, so he's not saying that everyone has to believe in the divinity of Christ in, like, a strictly traditional sense. He's saying that the story of Jesus offers this powerful model for how to be human, like how to engage with suffering, how to find meaning in life, how to embrace self-sacrifice. And that's what he finds so powerful.
Yeah, great way to put it. And this goes back to another key idea that he talks about a lot, this concept of voluntary self-sacrifice.
Right.
He sees this as, like, fundamental to how we function. Not just individually, but as a society, maybe even in, like, the universe itself.
That's a big one. So he's saying that choosing to sacrifice yourself for something bigger, it's like woven into the fabric of reality.
That's how he seems to see it. And this ties back to his whole critique of postmodernism, right?
Right.
If there's no grand narrative, no overarching story that gives meaning to our lives, then what's the point of self-sacrifice? Why bother struggling, striving, sacrificing for something larger than yourself if everything is ultimately meaningless?
That's a good point. I'm starting to see how all these pieces of his thinking fit together. Like, it's not just random opinions. Yeah. There's a coherence to it.
Definitely. And remember, in another interview, he even said that he believes that Jesus physically rose from the dead.
Right.
Now, for someone who used to approach religion more from like a psychological angle, that's a pretty significant statement.
It seems like a real shift, like a deepening of his engagement with Christian beliefs.
Definitely.
I wonder what this means for his own, personal journey.
Yeah, what kind of Christian will Jordan Peterson become?
Exactly. Will he follow his wife, who I think recently converted to Catholicism?
That's right, yeah.
Or will he forge his own path? Maybe take inspiration from people like William Lane Craig, who's known for his, really rigorous defense of Christian beliefs.
Yeah, it's almost like we're watching someone wrestle with these huge existential questions in real time.
Right.
And his answers are anything but predictable.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch. Here's a guy who built his career analyzing archetypes and the psychology of belief, and now he's making these bold statements about his own, evolving faith.
It is. It's like he's saying, look, I've spent years studying these stories, these narratives, exploring the depths of the human psyche, and you know what? This Christian narrative, this story of Jesus, it holds up. He's not just passively accepting it either.
No.
He's really engaging with it, grappling with it, trying to understand what it means for how we should live our lives.
There's this part in the video where he talks about how the pattern of the passion is the decision to voluntarily confront and welcome anything that happens to you, no matter what it is. It's like he's saying that embracing suffering, maybe even seeking it out, is the key to a meaningful life.
That's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah.
It goes against our natural instincts to avoid pain.
Right. We want to be comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Peterson's arguing that true growth, true transformation, it happens when we confront the tough stuff, the things that scare us.
It's about pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones.
Exactly.
He's basically saying the only way out is through. That the path to meaning and purpose, it lies in facing our fears and embracing the challenges that life throws at us.
And for him, the story of Jesus is like the ultimate example of this. Jesus didn't shy away from suffering. He embraced it, even to the point of death.
Right.
And through that sacrifice, he redeemed humanity.
It's powerful stuff. And it makes me think about my own life. Like, what does it mean for me to voluntarily confront the challenges, the suffering in my own life?
Yeah.
How do I find meaning and purpose when things are tough?
These are the questions that Peterson's wrestling with himself. And I think that's what makes his journey so fascinating. He's not offering easy answers, quick fixes.
Right.
He's inviting us to join him on this exploration, to grapple with these big questions alongside him.
I think it's refreshing to hear someone be so open about not having all the answers. In a world where everyone's so sure of themselves, so dogmatic, Peterson, he embodies this intellectual humility. It's like he's saying, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out.
Yeah.
And that willingness to explore, it's leading him down some really interesting paths. I mean, who would have guessed a few years ago that Jordan Peterson would be openly talking about the divinity of Christ and the possibility of a literal resurrection?
Yeah, it's amazing. It reminds us that life is full of surprises. And the most interesting journeys are often the ones that take us in unexpected directions.
It's a reminder that faith is not static. It's a process, a journey, a constant unfolding.
And Peterson's journey is a fascinating case study in how this process can play out in someone so brilliant, so complex.
It's a journey that's far from over. And I, for one, am really curious to see where it takes him. It's really something, isn't it? To see this evolution in his thinking. I mean, going from analyzing religion to potentially really embracing it.
It is, yeah. And it all comes back to this, this idea that the story of Jesus reveals something really deep about being human.
Right.
Peterson seems to be saying that the story, especially the suffering, the sacrifice, it's like a guide, like how to live a life with real meaning, a call to confront suffering, to find purpose in it, and to kind of move beyond just ourselves and our desires.
Earlier we were talking about him calling the Jesus is God claim indisputable. And I know that's a statement that could really rub some people the wrong way, especially those who, maybe don't have a Christian background. But when you really listen to what he's saying, I don't think he's pushing for this like blind faith or strict dogma.
No. It's about the power of stories.
Yeah.
The power of this specific story.
Right.
To shape how we see the world, how we live our lives.
Yeah, and I think that's something we all connect with on some level, right? I mean, stories, they've always been how we make sense of things.
They have. Of our place in the world, the things that really matter.
Yeah.
We use them to understand our past, figure out the present, even imagine what the future might hold. And Peterson's saying that the story of Jesus, even if you don't take it literally, it gives us these profound insights into what it means to be human. It's about facing challenges. It's about finding meaning in the midst of suffering. It's about making sacrifices for something bigger than ourselves.
Right. And whether you agree with Peterson's conclusions or not, I think engaging with these ideas, it can be really transformative. It makes you think about what you believe, your values, how you're living your own life.
Absolutely. It's like he's asking you, what do you believe in? What stories are you letting guide your life? And are those stories taking you where you want to go, leading you toward meaning, toward purpose?
Good question.
Peterson's journey, it encourages that kind of self-reflection.
Yeah.
And that's valuable no matter what your background is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jordan Peterson's evolving relationship with Christianity, we want to leave you with this. Does the power of a story, even if it's, fictional, does that make it true in a meaningful way?
It's a great question to ponder.
Think about all the myths and legends that have shaped cultures for centuries. Even if they're not, literally true, they can reveal these deep truths about what it means to be human.
Yeah.
They teach us about courage, about love, about loss.
About those things that make us human, make us who we are.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring these ideas so fascinating, right? It's not just about getting the right answer. It's about the journey, the wrestling with these big questions and the potential to grow along the way, to learn something new about yourself, about the world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. Keep asking those tough questions. You might be surprised at what you discover.